value of money. Now, I'm not predicting how the dollar does versus the euro or the pound because they're going to do the same thing. But it is the dumbest investment in the world. People were saying cash is king, in the last 6 months. Cash is crap, basically. Cash will, that is the one thing I can predict is what will happen to the value of cash over time. I don't know what will happen to equities or real estate.
But cash.
Cash is not the thing to have. And there's going to be a lot of it around because they'll be printing it.
I'm asked who are Warren's advisors? Warren's advisor is his mirror. Warren does not have advisors. He says, when I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror, and at that point, pretty much everybody's had their say. So.
But I also like it for lunch and dinner.
Still, the father-son relationship seems, can we say it, sweet.
So if I eat this 3 times a day, I'll have $1 billion?
Mm-hmm. You'll meet a guy with $1 billion. I just started, but I know mattresses.
Wait a minute, aren't you Warren Buffett?
Actually, I am.
And they've got you selling mattresses now?
It was something about that ratings downgrade, and the board thought I should maybe try something else, and they told me this was a promotion.
Oh, bet they did. Wow, rough year.
And I enjoy watching this canvas get larger and larger, but it isn't hard work. I mean, if any shareholders are listening, I'd like to tell them, I'm bathed in sweat at the end of the day or something. But it just isn't hard work. I play bridge every night. You could make it hard work. We could have that whole building filled with divisions reporting to each other, and I could have lots of data coming in, on time sales of how many boxes of peanut brittle did we sell at See's Candy yesterday, and I get a lot of figures, and they're the important ones, but there could be all kinds of make work stuff. We don't have any committees. I mean, if we had committees, we'd be talking about 75 people. Then we'd have other committees that were liaisons between the committees, and then they'd be going to conferences and reporting back to the others what they learned. I mean, it just goes on endlessly. We don't have any of that.
What was it Ronald Reagan said about work?
Yeah, well, Ronald Reagan said, he said, they tell me that hard work never kills anybody, but he said, I feel, why take the chance?
Upon you is probably the greatest nation builder that ever built. Now, occasionally he would use a pretty tough method. When he took over, he was a very young man, and he needed an army. He was surrounded by a bunch of Muslims that hated him, and in fact, they'd spit him out. He asked all the other nations of the world to please help him get an army because the English just left and said, handle your own problems. And every nation in the world refused to help him but one, and that was Israel. And he said, how am I going to take military aid surrounded by Muslims who hate me from Israel? He finally figured it out. He accepted the aid and told everybody they were Mexicans. Well, you can see why he was so successful.
Okay, well, I now am going to reveal something that will be the first time anybody's seen this. At the shareholder
Not
meeting...
on this program.
No, that'll be tonight later.
We have a table in front of you because Warren specifically asked for that. I guess you guys have done an arm wrestling challenge before. Are you trying to recreate that this time around?
I'd be delighted to.
You won last time, right?
I wouldn't have brought the subject up unless I had.
What did you do? You must have completely distracted him before.
I felt it was only fair to give him a return match.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're ready.
I'm game.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready. Okay. I'm toying with him. Watch it. Just let me know when you want me to give it to him. Becky, tell me when.
Go.
Okay.
Smart man, Indomitian.
I am. At least this time he didn't make me sign the affidavit. So.
No, I had him sign a release last time that if I heard him, he wouldn't sue me. I just don't think you look back and think about anything that could be changed better. I'm thankful.
Isn't there at least one bridge hand you would have played differently?
Well, I have a partner who says I should have played every bridge hand differently. I asked her one time, I said, how should I play that hand? And she said, under an assumed name. What Cyprus demonstrates is an old truth. You can't trust bankers to govern themselves.
A banker who's allowed to borrow money at X and loan it out at X plus Y will just go crazy and do too much of it if the civilization doesn't have rules that prevent it. What happened in Cyprus was very similar to what happened in Iceland. It was stark raving mad in both cases. And the bankers, they'd be doing even more if the thing hadn't blown up. I do not think you can trust bankers to control themselves. They're like heroin addicts.
When Melinda is in Africa and she's holding a little baby, I mean, she is actually thinking, you know, this kid needs to be vaccinated, has a decent chance in education and all that. I feel the same way about the kid, but what I really think is he's going to pee on me, you know, can I hand him something? So there's just a difference in that human touch that makes a big difference.
I'm halfway in between.
I think he's closer to me, actually.
Do you feel that technology has made businesses more efficient to the point where you can pay more for them?
Well, I'm sure technology has made more efficient, and if I thought otherwise, I'd be afraid to say so with Bill sitting next to me.
Warren.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my grandson.
Sure.
I read the book when I was 19 called The Intelligent Investor, and I'd been interested in investments since I was maybe 7 or 8, but I'd read every book in the Omaha Public Library by the time I was 11.
So why do you think you were interested in investing when you were 7 or 8?
Because I was too dumb to get interested at 4.
Warren says that when a business with a reputation for being tough and a manager with an opportunity for being brilliant get together, he says it's the reputation of the business that remains. And if they start tough, they stay tough. Yeah. It's really hard to change a whole business or a person. Lots of luck if you're disappointed in one of your children.
I want you to give me a good, clean fight. Any questions you're going to have? Yeah. Do you know how to count from 1 to 10? Because this is going to be a short fight. Gonna give him the old 1-2 punch? No, I'm not giving away anything now. He'll find out when he gets in another 10 seconds, and he'll know what to watch out for. Okay. Marciano punch? Marciano learned it from me. Marciano learned that from you? Yeah, he learned it from me. Okay. Yeah, Brockton, Massachusetts. Right. Yeah.
I like to teach. I think I'll move this just up a little bit. Let's go back to that key. Coca-Cola, keep it company. I like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company. The interesting thing is, of course, now, is that the 4 auditing firms left, what they call the final 4 now in the auditing. They have now, and listen, I'm glad they did it too, and I tip my hat to them for doing it, but they've now said that they really do think options are an expense. So this is, that it kind of reminds you of what happened during the Reformation, isn't it? When you'd have these places sway back and forward, as they get carried by one argument or the other. In fact, I think there was that famous vicar of Bray who would swing from Catholicism to Luther back and forth as this little town went back and forth in Germany. And finally the townspeople gathered and they said to the vicar, they said, it's understandable that we're confused by all that's going on in theology and we really don't know much about it, and so we swing back and forth. But they said, we find it a little disgusting that you, a man of the cloth, would also keep swaying back and forth. And they said, have you no principle? And he said, yes, I have one principle. He says it's to remain the vicar of Bray. Well, I think we've seen a little of that in the auditing profession, but I think they've actually found the true religion now. So I don't want to sit here and criticize them, but you know, you now have 4 firms that lobbied against options being counted as an expense in 1993 that have written the FASB and say that options should be an expense. And I don't know how in the world something could have not been an expense in 1993 and be an expense in 2003. It certainly didn't apply to utility bills or, you know, raw materials or anything of the sort. Of course, I could buy the world of Coke, but I'm not sure my shareholders would go for that. Some businesses are a lot easier to understand than others. And Charlie and I don't like difficult problems. I mean, if something is hard to figure, you know, I mean, we'd rather multiply by 3 than by pi. I mean, it's just easier for us. Charlie, I mean.
Well, that is such an obvious point, and yet so many people think if they just hire somebody with the appropriate labels, they can do something very difficult. That is one of the most dangerous ideas a human being can have. All kinds of things just intrinsically create problems. The other day I was dealing with a problem and I said, this thing, it's a new building. And I said, this thing has 3 things I've learned to fear: an architect, a contractor, and a hill. And if you go at life like that, I think you at least make fewer mistakes than people who think they can do anything by just hiring somebody with a label.
Excuse me, go ahead, sir.
You don't have to hire out your thinking if you keep it simple.
A lot of things in business, including maybe much of technology, really has the same effect as if you went to a parade and the band started coming down the street and all of a sudden you stood up on tiptoe. I mean, in another 30 seconds, everybody would be on tiptoe. You know, it'd be hell on your legs and you wouldn't be seeing any better. And there is that aspect to business, that there's a self-neutralizing aspect. Now, Bill, tell them how much technology you'll make for them.
Big earners into that world, getting that type of return on equity. There's something almost certainly ephemeral about current conditions.
Capitalism tends to be self-neutralizing in terms of improvements, but that's marvelous because it means we've got better everything than we would have otherwise. But the real trick is to stand up on tiptoe and not have anyone notice it. I mean, if you can do that, then you do very well. Yeah.
Not even $1 billion, or $1 million for that matter, has gone to the Buffett children for their personal use.
Hi! I don't think just because they came out of the right womb that they're entitled to live a life of doing nothing. I've followed a dictum basically of if you're very rich, you should give your kids enough so they can do anything, but not enough so they can do nothing.
Do anything but not enough so they can do nothing.
Yep.
I love that. Very Yoda-like, don't you think? It's kind of got this thing where it's this, yeah, it's great. I love it.
Warren. You're not going to sell too many of these sleeping on the job.
Oh, Bob, I was just testing. You know, you can't be too sure about product quality.
Look, Warren, when you were chairman, you could sleep all day and wait for the phone to ring, but we know how well that went last year.
Oh, great. He had to bring that up.
That's why the board sent you over to me, and as long as I've got you, you're going to sell.
You have Mr. Gates there. I'm just wondering why you've never bought Microsoft.
Well, in the earlier years, it's very clear. The answer is stupidity. Charlie?
Well, it's part of theology that a late conversion is better than never, and you've greatly improved yourself.
Warren, it seems to me that athletes, movie stars, people who are newly into money like this probably have a lot of people who are going after them, trying to prey on that money and find ways of telling it. What advice have you given?
Well, I mean, that always happens, and then there's some smart guys like Indomitian that recognize that, but they're going to get it. I mean, they probably get female groupies, and then they get financial groupies.
Which do you prefer?
I know which one I prefer. I advise students, as much as possible, look for the job that you would take if you didn't need a job. I mean, don't sleepwalk through life, and Don't say it's all going to be great. You know, I'll do this and I'll do that, and you know, I'm just marking time till I get to be older. That, as I've told people, that's like saving up sex for your old age. I mean, it just is not it is not a good idea. Yeah.
I would like to know what's your favorite industry and why it's your favorite industry.
My favorite industry? Well, my favorite industry is taking care of my own affairs.
Thanks to the gentleman who bid last year $2.1 million. It'll definitely help. Zhao Dongyang was his name, and he's with the Pure Heart Hedge Fund. Here he is. Hi, Zhao.
He's a hero. Hi, Zhao. Good to see you.
Nice to turn to it. So tell us quickly, you excited?
Yeah, it's very nice. All right, happy.
How much is your fund?
Yeah.
How much is your fund up for the year?
About 47%.
47. What do you need his advice for?
Wait a second. Here you are, Zhao. You get 47%. Go to it.
Give him the wallet. Now,
I think there's a million different reasons for philanthropy. And one thing that is very interesting that I've observed in my life, I've known a lot of roguish people that made a fair amount of money, and they start giving a little money to show off. And 20 years later, they're actually real philanthropists. You become what you pretend to be to some considerable extent. And having observed this so much, I think there's something to be said for hypocrisy, but that's not a common observation, but I've seen it do so much good in life that I don't think it's all bad, the hypocrisy. I always try to pretend to be a little better than I am. Not too much.
I feel very lucky that I've gotten to live in this era rather than a couple hundred years ago. If I go to the dentist, I mean, you know, I can sit there and, you know, they could be doing a root canal and I could be daydreaming about other things. And 100 years ago, they'd be pouring whiskey down me and holding my arms and everything. You know? So there's been a lot of improvement.
Warren, we're happy that you're living in this era also, believe me.
We have such a fingers and toes style around Berkshire Hathaway. You know, you sort of count and...
Yeah.
I've never seen, you know, Warren talks about these discounted cash flows. I've never seen him do one.
Yeah.
If it isn't,
there are some things you only do in private, Charlie.
Yeah. If it isn't perfect obvious that it's going to work out well if you do the calculation, he tends to go on to the next idea. Well, let me tell you the final one, what these great IQ 160 people do. It takes 20 extra square feet of space under the building code that binds a university in California, the UC system. 20 extra square feet to give a student his own private sleeping area. Can you think of anything dumber than building housing that's going to last 200 years when you force a whole bunch of unrelated people to live together and throw up on one another and God knows what. To save 20 extra square, the incremental cost of 20 extra, it's insane. So I gave every student his own room. And when
Hey, all right.
and when I went to the Regents Committee, there was this nice woman, and she said, you know, she says, I never had a single room in my whole college career where I didn't have somebody else in it. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I'm fixing it. But why wasn't it already fixed?
Well, did you study architecture, or how did you come to all of this?
Well, I hate to admit this to somebody like you who's a perfectionist, but I pick easy problems.
There you are.
And it's easy to fix housing when the people are so dumb they put two unrelated people in the same room and it takes 20 extra square feet to eliminate that defect. So I seek out easy problems. I've tried hard problems. It makes it a lot more difficult. Warren and I were offered $2 million worth of projections once in the course of buying a business, and the book was this thick. And
for nothing.
And we were given it for nothing, and we wouldn't open it.
Yeah. we'd almost pay $2 million not to look at it.
20% or so of Precision's profits come from the oil and gas industry, which is sort of struggling with the bust part of the boom and bust cycle. Do you anticipate the slowdown there lasting much longer?
I really don't know, Liz. I know it isn't going to last forever, but I have no idea whether it'll last 6 months or 2 years or 3 years.
Doesn't sound like you care either, at least for the short term.
No, I really don't. If you find a good business run by a terrific manager and you can make it a deal at a reasonable price, you do it, and you don't pay any attention to what astrologers are saying or anybody else.
There's some things that are so intrinsically dangerous. Another of my heroes is Mark Twain, who looked at the promoters of his day, and he said, "A mine is a hole in the ground owned by a liar." And that's the way I've come to look at projections.
I'm curious about CIT. You know, it impacts so many different small to mid-sized business owners.
The problem with CIT is that their raw material, which is money, costs them far, far, far more than their competitors. So the banks have access to money at average rates that are really very tiny now, and CIT's money costs them way more. And if you're the high-cost producer in a business, eventually it catches up with you, and basically that business has to be transferred to somebody who has low funding costs. Well, on that interim deal they made the other day, they paid 13%, a minimum of 13 plus a lot of fees. You can't compete in the money business paying 13% for money today. It just doesn't work. It's not a successful business model. Maybe they should watch our show, The Secret Millionaires Club. A little advice on that. You can't pay loan shark rates and compete with people that are getting their money on a government guaranteed basis for practically nothing.
We know what Mr. Buffett's retirement plans are. I was wondering what your plans for the future concerning Berkshire are.
I've always preferred the system of retirement where you can't quite tell from observing from the outside whether the man is working or retired.
He does it well, too.
A problem in many businesses, particularly the more bureaucratic ones, is that your employees retire, but they don't tell you. And
the study found that sugar-sweetened beverages contributed to 133,000 deaths from diabetes, 45,000 deaths from cardiovascular disease, 6,450 deaths from cancer.
I think the people who ask questions like that one always make one ghastly error that's really inexcusable. They measure the detriment without considering the advantage. Well, that's really stupid. That's like saying we should give up air travel through airlines because 100 people die a year in air crashes or something. That would be crazy. The benefit is worth the risk. We ought to have almost a law in the editorial. I'm sounding like Donald Trump, where these people shouldn't be allowed to cite the defects without citing the offsetting advantage. It's immature and stupid.
I should also say to you that they have been here before. This was, I think, in 2009, was it?
Sounds right.
Do you remember, Bill?
Yep.
2009. And what was that event called?
Making America Great, wasn't it?
Keeping America Great.
Keeping America. We're entitled to a royalty.
By the way, there's a remarkable documentary about Warren, which is on HBO. I think it premieres on January 30th, on Monday. Yeah. You should take time to take a look at it. It's called, I think, Becoming Warren Buffett.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Becoming. Took me 86 years, but I got
there. You're doing well on it, though, aren't you?
Well, so far, yeah. But best is yet to come.
How in the hell can you run out of land and think you're being a rational university? UCLA is run out of land. Berkeley is run out of land. How can places so massively brilliant, they win Nobel Prizes and so forth, be stupid enough to run out of land? The answer is they get these damn bureaucracies. Somebody has to be the adult in the room who it's not a mild bit of craziness to run out of land if you're UCLA. Well, my grandfather would say, he basically thought it was sinful to be dumber than you had to be. And I share some of that. What you can't remove, I think, is forgivable, but to have an easily removable ignorance in your own head is really stupid.
These institutions are too big to fail, and it was demented to allow derivative trading to end up the way it has ended up, and with the clearance risks that are embedded in the present system. And it's amazing how few people spoke against it as it was happening. There was just so much easy money to be reported. A lot of the money that was reported as being earned wasn't really being earned. It was in that wonderful category of assets that I call good until reached for. They sit there on the balance sheet, and when you reach for it, it just fades away like...
He's not kidding.
Missed.
He's not kidding.
Charlie takes on these public jobs. He runs a hospital and a few things, and he can tell you the wonders of it. Charlie?
Oh, yeah. There's an old saying that he lied like a finance minister on the eve of a devaluation. I never wanted to have a job where lying was a required part of the activity.
I do not understand why any buyer of a business looks at a bunch of projections put together by a seller or
his agent.
Or his agent. I mean, you can almost say that it's naive to think that that has any utility whatsoever. We just are not interested. If we don't have some idea ourselves of what we think the future is, to sit there and listen to some other guy who's trying to sell us the business or get a commission on it, tell us what the future is going to be, like I say, it's very naive.
Yeah, and 5 years out.
Yeah. We had a line in the report one time, don't ask the barber whether you need a haircut. And it's quite applicable to projections by sellers of businesses. Well, the only money investors are going to make in the long run are what the businesses make. I mean, there is nothing added. The government doesn't throw in anything. You know, nobody's adding to the pot. People are taking out from the pot in terms of frictional costs, and you can't constantly have corporate profits grow at a faster rate than GDP. And obviously, in the end, they'd be greater than GDP. And it's like somebody said that New York has more lawyers than people. I mean, there's certain, you run into certain conflicts in the terminology as you go along if you say profits can get bigger than GDP. So anytime you get involved in these things where if you trace out the mathematics of it, you bump into absurdities, then you better change expectations somewhat. Charlie?
Well, there are two great sayings. One is, if a thing can't go on forever, it will eventually stop. And the other I borrow from my friend Fred Stanback, who I think is here. People who expect perpetual growth in real wealth in a finite earth are either madmen or economists.
Thank you, gentlemen. Before we adjourn for Big Macs and Cokes, any final thoughts?
Well, that's pretty tempting just not to give you any final thoughts if I got that waiting.